Welcome everybody to our ordinary meeting of Council, 23rd of May. Just a reminder that this meeting is being live streamed on our Council Facebook page, and if we could all stand for our opening karakia. Tu taua mai ronga, tu taua mai raro, tu taua mai roto, tu taua mai waho, kia tau ai mautu, te mauri ora ki te katoa, hone hui pai ki. We have apologies from Councillors Mawson and Taylor. If I could have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Crown and Deputy Brosnan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Do we have any conflicts of interest? There's no announcements from myself. Any minor matters not on the agenda? I will. Any announcements by management? No. Okay. Confirmation of the minutes from the meeting held on the 18th of April. If I could have a mover, and thank you, Councillor Price and Deputy Mayor Brosnan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And just to let you all know that agenda item 4, the CCTV policy update paper, has been withdrawn due to the unavailability of staff to present to it, so that will be coming to us at a later meeting. And our first agenda item today is the significance and engagement policy, which Anne Bradbury will be presenting from staff. And we do also have John Wise with us today, one of our submitters, who would like to speak to his submission, which was submission number 12. So, John, I'd welcome you to come up to the front and present to us, please. Lovely to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
Tēnā koutou katoa, John Wise aho. So, can you hear me clearly at this level?
Yes.
Yeah. Good, thank you. Before I begin, I would like you to note that this submission has been slightly amended. This is because I have recently learned that Anne Bradbury and her team have already done considerable work on my topic. And I'm trying to avoid talking about stuff that you may already know about. The purpose of this submission is to encourage the Council to add a new community engagement process to Spectrum 4 of the significance and engagement policy under review. It's on page 10, I think. I'm convinced that the engagement process in question will add a valuable new tool to the community engagement toolbox. This new process is variously named deliberative democracy, a citizens' assembly, or in some cases, a community panel. For this presentation, I'm going to use the term citizens' assembly. So what does this mean? What is a citizens' assembly? In plain English, a citizens' assembly is a representative group of people who have come together to learn about an issue, to discuss it, and reach a conclusion on what they think should happen. This is not the right time for me to go into the ins and outs of promoting, preparing, and running a citizens' assembly process. Today, on top of adding the new process to the policy, my objective is to whet your appetite. I want to spur your interest in this concept. I want you alongside Anne Bradbury and her team, sharing the Citizens' Assembly learning journey. Should this happen, you will be preparing the ground for a real-life test. What do I like about it? The big picture is because I believe the Citizens' Assembly process will not only enrich the Council's engagement processes and options, it will enrich the lives of our communities. So what is it again? A Citizens' Assembly is a representative group of people who have come together to learn about an issue, to discuss it, and to reach a conclusion on what they think should happen. Here are some more specific reasons that I like this. Each assembly accurately represents the demographic of the community being impacted by that decision. The assembly can be scaled up and it can be scaled down to suit the issue. Assembly members are rewarded for their commitment. The process is professionally facilitated. Assembly principles align with both the Significance and Engagement Policy and the Local Government Act 2002. The Council has no influence over the Assembly's decision-making. The process empowers community. As per a pre-signed agreement, the Assembly will either report to Council with their final decision or with an agreed recommendation. The Council then has the option to agree or not agree. The latter option is very rare. But if it is the latter, the Council must make a public statement explaining why they did not agree. To conclude, citizens' assemblies have spread like wildfire since the first one in Ireland 10 years ago. They are now common in Australia, and we have 2 examples that I know of in New Zealand, Wellington and Auckland. As a retired professional facilitator of community development through engagement, I'm really encouraged by this development in engagement strategies. We're living in divisive times internationally, nationally, and locally. This process offers opportunities to build inclusiveness and social cohesion in Napier's communities. I ask you again, please consider including this process in your policy. One other point. If and when Council reaches the point of wanting to give this process a go, please remember that the Pilot City Trust has recently dedicated time and resources to the process supporting piloting, that is, testing Napier's community initiatives. And I'm confident that the Trust would collaborate with Council on this project. Finally, I have gathered some deliberative democracy material, case studies, websites and other resources which I'll share with Anne and anyone else who wants further information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And you and I have had a number of conversations on this, so you know that I'm already very, very supportive of using this tool within our community. If I refer to Schedule 4 of the policy, and it splits, obviously, in the second part between formal and informal in terms of the tools available. We currently do have People's Panel included in the informal section.
Yes.
But my sort of understanding of a citizens' assembly, based on the information you've presented, is that this is more of a formal process.
Yes.
Yes, so it would actually, in our policy, need to be included within that formal toolkit, not just the informal toolkit as such.
Yes, that would be my, could I respond to that?
Yes, yeah.
That would be my understanding. I've noticed that you are using the term in the policy already, that is a community panel. That's very different from the assembly that I'm talking about, yeah, which is, as you say, is much more formal.
That's right. So yes, so the addition of it, and whether the terminology was citizens' assembly or something slightly different, but it definitely including it in the schedule as one of the formal tools available to us.
Yes,
yeah.
That's right.
Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Kia ora, John.
Hi.
Thank you for presenting your submission to us and providing us with that good food for thought. You did say in your submission that the Citizens' Assembly would be rewarded. Could you tease that out a little bit for me so I can understand what you mean by that?
Yeah, they're paid. I don't know what the figures are here. I do know what they are in the UK because that's where I've got a lot of the information from, and also know what they got in Australia recently, which was a minimum hourly wage for the hours they put in to the active days. So the active days of deliberation vary, but they're averaging around about 5 or 6 days of deliberation per issue. And those days are spread, so there's 3, sometimes 4 weeks between them. And so the people who've nominated themselves and been selected are paid, and they get their food and refreshments during the days that they're deliberating.
Thank you.
And I can see some worries,
I think
some
it's,
concerns about the costs involved there. I don't know how that would pan out here. That's going to have to be part of your research. But in Australia, they say it's roughly equal, the total cost, roughly equal to other forms of deliberation and consultation.
so that would sit within our overarching community engagement
Yeah.
funding.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through Madam Mayor. Hi, John.
Hi.
How are the citizens selected for the Assembly?
I'm
How
sorry, I
would,
didn't
how
hear
would
that.
the citizens be selected for the Assembly?
How are they selected?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In Australia and Victoria, they recently relied on a database of demographics of the community that was impacted. And they used that to put invitations out and ask people if would they be interested in being a member. And they matched those demographic data with who they invited. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, John. Thank you for
Kia ora.
the submission. Just a random question from me. In that Schedule 4 table that we've got there, which column would you think that the Citizens' Assembly would fit under? It's obviously not inform or consult, but would it be involve, collaborate, or empower in your mind?
I would certainly start with it with empower on the extreme right end.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I know that it scales down very successfully into smaller communities, maybe even a neighbourhood that's got an issue where this could be scaled down and to get a result, an agreed result. So maybe it spans across those last 3 columns, but specifically I think it's focused in at the empowerment end.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to tease that out a little bit further, because the empower column does mean that actually the final decision is made by the community.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I thought I heard in your submission that it was that the final decision would lie with the council based on the recommendations, but that it was that the standard, it was very rare that the council would go against the recommendation
Yes.
of the assembly.
I gave those 2 options. The one option is that the decision is made by the Assembly.
Right, yep.
The making a recommendation to council is another option, and I've discovered that in my research that it happens on some occasions.
Okay.
But I don't know what the criteria that creates that division. So, yeah. But essentially, the responsibility is with the people who are in the Assembly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, I've seen community panels used to good effect in Australia following crises
Good.
and other events. They were more expert panels from within the community. Do you see these as expert panels or representative panels? And how then, if it's representative, do you determine what representative?
Yeah, that was a similar question.
Yeah.
Yes. Going back again to all I've got to tell you on this, and I'm still researching it. It's a really good question. How do you select a representative assembly? That's basically the question, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
If that's the intent for it to be representative, yeah.
Yes, yeah. The Coliban in Victoria recently used a database of demography within that community. So, for example, the people who are directly have a stake in the result that would be represented. Geographically, people would be represented by age, by gender, and so on and so forth, so that the people who are on the panel represent proportionately the makeup of the community that's being impacted.
So through you, Madam Chair, so the database, is that a random community database or is that a database of willing people?
I don't know whether they exist here. The database was an official database in Victoria. How they gather that data, I don't know. Yeah. So, I mean, these are good questions, and they're questions that need to be addressed, aren't they, in the next little...
So when I've watched the models, that's been my curiosity.
I mean, we can look at, we just have to look at other models, I think, see how they're doing that. Yeah. So I'm sorry I don't have a really specific answer to you, but
No,
yeah.
that's fine.
But the goal is to have as accurate a representation of the whole by the 60-odd people, which is about the average number of people on an assembly, by the way, 60.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Hi, John, Annette here. Thank you
hi.
so much for your submission. It was really interesting to read. Do you mind if I play devil's advocate with you with a question?
I'm sorry, my hearing's not so good.
Would you mind if I played devil's advocate with you with a question? So my question is, we've heard the model. So you've got a group of citizens who are representative of the community, who learn about an issue, spend the time to learn about an issue, and they reach a conclusion. They're representative of the community. How is that any different to your elected councillors who are a group of citizens who spend the time to learn about an issue, who reach a conclusion? They're representative of the community because we have community-based boards in Napier. Other than, I think you made mention of they're not influenced by council, but I would put to you, neither are councillors. We receive the information from council staff, as I propose any assembly would receive information about an issue from council and probably other sources like we do. How is it different? That's my devil's advocate question to you.
One difference is there'll be 50 to 60, sometimes more people, which will essentially broaden the conversation. They're not politicians. And I think that's the essential answer to your question. Their interest is in the well-being of their community, not necessarily the well-being of the whole city.
Right, so more, so through you, Madam Chair, because I would probably put to you, many people around this table are not politicians as well. In fact, most of us, I don't think, consider ourselves as such community representatives, but...
The elected members are politicians.
Yes. So the biggest difference would be the number of people in a room trying to find a consensus and potentially not with the interest of the whole city at heart, but with the interest of a particular subset.
Yes, yeah. It's very, very focused on the remit or the question that's at the core of the discussion.
Okay.
I mean, again, that's a very interesting question, and
Thank you. That was
I've got to be
helpful.
very careful here because I'm driven by bias.
Thank
But
you.
thank
That was
you for it.
helpful.
Councillor McGrath and then
good.
Councillor Bogue.
Just through the chair, none of us are driven by bias. Just a couple of questions there to go. Do you think the size of a city being represented plays a role in this? And I say that Napier, 105 square kilometres, and I just look at the examples you gave of being Wellington and Auckland, both with significantly larger population bases than we have and areas.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know the answer to that question. It just seems to be the case studies I've looked at all seem to be in that 50 to 60 number of people on the assembly? Yes, yeah, good question. Don't have an answer, sorry.
And just a second question. You mentioned Auckland and Wellington as having examples.
Yes.
Do you have any information of what they may have deliberated over or had input?
I do. I don't have that here, but yes, I do, and maybe Anne has got that already.
Okay.
And if not, I can provide you with that. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Hi, John. Kia ora. Yeah, I really like the idea of this, but there's a few things that I would like to find a bit more about. I didn't realise it was 50 to 60 people. How would those people be selected, and what would trigger the assembling of this assembly?
The second part of your question, I didn't quite catch the first part. The second part is, it's the sort of question that would go to a referendum, is a good definition. The sort of issue where there are clear options and discussion needed before the option is. So currently, at the moment, are there issues like that, for example, facing the council?
Well, Māori wards.
Māori wards may well
go to
be,
the-
yes.
That's
yeah,
going to go to the election anyway.
yeah. What was the
Sorry,
first part of
Maxine,
your
I
question?
believe the first part of your question has already been asked twice.
How they're selected.
Of how they're selected, yes. Also,
I didn't realise it was 50 or 60, though. I was thinking a small group.
Councillor Crystal.
Hi, I'm Rhonda, through the chair. Just, obviously, you've got this group of people, but for different topics, you'd have to select different groups. Is that what you're saying? Or be the same assembly for all topics?
No, the assembly, one assembly per one topic.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
yeah.
Yes, okay. So once that assembly completes its task, they disappear back into their communities, and if there's another issue, then there'll be another selection.
So it's a bit like a jury.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. In other environments where they've used these panels, have they identified an economic scale? In other words, the cost of implementing a decision versus the cost of the process?
I don't know.
The reason I
Again,
ask that
yeah.
question, if we're talking 50 to 60 people and they're going to meet for 5 days and get paid minimum wage, that's nearly $60,000
Yeah.
to reach a decision. So my question is, are there examples where it's proven to be economically prudent to go down that track versus financially reckless?
I haven't looked at that at all. Anne, you have looked at that? Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Morning, all. Through the chair, I'm taking notes, and one of the challenges is having a submitter presenting on the day that we're summarising the paper, but I am prepared to answer some of these questions later if that would help, or I can answer some of them now with...
Are there any further questions of John? Otherwise, we can... Yeah. Thank you so much. You're welcome to just stay sitting up the front in case any other questions arise
Yes, yeah,
as
I'd
we
like to do
invite
that.
Anne
Yeah.
to basically talk to
Yeah.
the paper and respond to any of
Just
the...
let me say, I'm absolutely delighted that I've lit a little fire here. That's what it feels like. Right, there's some interest, which is grand. Thank you very
Excellent.
much indeed for listening. Thank you.
Morena Koto. I'm here today to talk about the significance and engagement policy. On the 14th of March, Council resolved to adopt the draft policy and take the policy out for consultation. We did that as part of our 3-year plan from the 25th of March to the 26th of April. We received 15 submissions on the draft policy, and one of the submitters that supported the policy chose to speak to the council today, and we've just heard John talking to the council. John was submitter 13, I think, 12, sorry. This was talking about considering a citizens' assembly as part of one of our engagement tools. Our team has been looking into this, and we've been following Wellington City Council, who have done this very recently for their long-term plan. They split their long-term plan up into about 5 stages, and stage number 2 and 5 was involving a citizens' assembly. And as I understand it, that has worked really well for them. It seems like it does work for big, complex issues where you want to get, the community involved in making the decision. As I understand it, the Citizens' Assembly, the panel needs to represent the community, and that is by things like age, gender, geography, socioeconomic status, and I know some of them now are looking at including disability and other kind of criteria, so it represents the community that way, which is one of the reasons why it needs to be quite large. Research has shown that the Citizens' Assembly generally have the same answer as what you will hear back from consultation when we just go out doing some of our usual consultation channels. So if the panel represents the community, then it does come back with the same answer that other consultation tools use. But there are some, it also doesn't substitute, excuse me, it also doesn't substitute for general engagement. So if you just use a panel, then you're really consulting with only 60 people, even though they might give you exactly the same answer. We still need to probably go out and consult with the rest of the community anyway, so they understand the process and understand what's happening. We have not, going back to, thank you. Going back to the policy, it is not included in Schedule 4. I've left the policy on my table. But that doesn't include all the tools. However, we can add it into the tools. Mayor, I think you asked a question, thank you, about where would it sit, and I think it would only sit and empower if the community made the decision, and generally we would come back to council and recommend a decision. However, council would have that delegation to let the panel make the decision if that's what the council wished. So I think I've covered some of the questions to give our viewpoint as well, but if there's any more on the Citizens' Assembly, I can take them now, and then I can carry on with the rest of the paper.
Councillor Bogue.
If the council decides this is a good idea, what would be the process?
We have been looking into this. I think you've asked some questions about how we would decide the panel, and I think we would need to look at things like census, and I know that doesn't fully represent the whole community. In some areas of the community, people don't fill in the census, but we would need to look at demographics that we have to make sure the panel did represent the community.
Just a further question. What I actually meant was, if we decided today, this is a great idea and we want to put it in this policy,
Yep.
What would the process be?
Our team would need to think about consultation events or engagement events coming up and see where it would fit. As we heard earlier, it does cost some money because we need to compensate people for their time, and it does take a bit of time because people need to understand the issues before they can all agree on what their solution would be.
Councillor Bogue, if what you're asking is how do we get it in the policy, I think it would be as simple as just in our resolution adding in for Citizens' Assembly to be included in Schedule 4.
Yep.
I think in terms of including it in the policy, it's just then making it an option, and then the next step on from that would be looking at how, if we did then decide to use the tool at some stage, where there would need to be implementation,
Yeah, through the chair, Schedule 4 talks about tools, and it does not limit the council's discretion to use another form of engagement. So our engagement isn't limited to Schedule 4, but having it in there kind of highlights it as a tool that we could use in the future.
Thanks, Anne. Councillor Price.
Thank you. You sort of semi-answered it. So who would make the decision on whether to use the Assembly?
So we often come to the council when we're with a high-level engagement plan when we're going out for consultation. So our team would look into it and figure out if it was going to be appropriate for a a project or an opportunity coming up, and we would present that to the council, and you would make the decision on whether we could use that.
And there could also be us suggesting it as an
Yes.
engagement tool to staff for
Yep.
them then to analyse and see if they think it would be a suitable tool and come back to us with a recommendation. But ultimately, the decision would lie with us. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. If we were to add this concept into the strategy, would we need to address the principles to make sure that they support such a detailed process?
The principles
I don't believe so.
in Schedule 4 or
No,
in...
the principles, what are they? Page 12 of the agenda? I'm not sure what page number of the actual policy. Page 4 of 14? I think the current principles are open enough, but I'm just looking at the expectations of such a panel as to whether the principles are robust enough to trigger the use of it.
I think the principles are open enough. The principles also mention that we have to encourage those interested in a matter to present their views to the council. So a citizens' assembly would not be the only tool that we would use. As I said before, we would need to talk to the community about what we're doing above a citizens' assembly as well as a citizens' assembly.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Where would our definition of a citizens' assembly sit? Would it sit in the policy or outside of? How would we make sure that there was clarity available to the community as well as staff and ourselves as to exactly how we are going to run or define a citizens' assembly?
We don't have any definitions of tools inside the current policy. All the tools listed in Schedule 4 aren't defined. So I'm not sure if we would need to do that for the Citizens' Assembly. However, we would need to be clear about the process when we're going to use it.
Develop a separate policy.
I can hear the whisper down the
Yeah.
table, and that's pretty much what I was thinking about, the development of a separate policy around it, because I'm of the opinion, you do the same thing over and over again, you get the same outcome.
Yep.
And I know one of the things that we are challenged with is getting engagement from our community in a meaningful way. So new tools, they should be considered, but there also, I think, needs to be a very clear definition about how it's used, the makeup of it, our processes internally as to how we activate it, etc. And I'm worried that the policy as it stands currently really doesn't allow for that. So just trying to understand what vehicle we would use in order to provide us with that clarity. And I'm thinking perhaps the development of a separate policy would be appropriate.
I'm only hesitating because I'm not one to create a policy just for the sake of creating a policy. But I understand what you're saying in terms of there being very clear guidance and parameters around what this new tool would look like.
And that's why I wondered around definitions, whether there was space within definition to provide that clarity, understanding that we haven't done it for some of the other tools, or as an appendix to the policy, something which actually clearly states it, that we can refer to, that we can show other people, Yeah.
Deputy Mayor, are you wanting to add something to this?
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. I agree with everything Councillor Crown has said around the requirement for us to have some certainty, not only around this table, but in the community and with staff around how that rollout would occur if we actioned the Assembly. What I was going to add to the conversation was, rather than a policy, it's potentially just a the word policy probably gets overused, but a code of practice or a document that sits outside, as I'm sure there are many documents for guidance to staff on how they roll out different consultation items. So yeah, was just adding that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, yeah, that makes perfect sense to have, as you say, some sort of code of practice. Yeah. Councillor McGrath.
Just through the chair, while I see this as a new thing, we have some other tools in here that have been around for a while. People's panels. Do we have and you know, we've got steering groups and technical experts and expert panels. Have we put definitions around how they would be chosen as well, or are we just looking to put it around this new option?
Do we have any existing sort of documentation around when you would choose one form of engagement tool over another?
Through the chair, so this significance and engagement policy isn't the only way that we engage across council. It's how we engage on significant issues and assets. We don't have a council engagement strategy, which would be more of a how-to, and that's something our team's looking at creating in the second half of the year, so we can bring that to you in a workshop. We follow the IAP2 schedule for engagement, which is where Schedule 4 comes from. It's the process from inform through to empower. So that's what we follow, which is sort of international best practice for engagement.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion?
Not on
Councillor
that matter,
Simpson.
but on other aspects of the policy.
Of the policy, yeah. Okay, so we'll continue with.
I was just going to suggest that potentially one option in terms of being able to move ahead with the policy today would be to include this, but then to maybe ask staff to go away and produce the guidelines.
Yeah.
Be able to move forward with
When we do the
policy today.
resolution.
That's
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So, as I said, this John was the only submitter that was wishing to speak to council today. Another submitter that supported the changes, supported the new policy, proposed some changes, but I'm not recommending any changes following the submitter. So 7 submitters supported the changes and 8 did not support the changes. As discussed in the report, some of these submitters that did not support the changes provided more general comments on council's activities that were more linked to the 3-year plan. These comments have been included by other submitters as part of the 3-year plan, so council will be considering these comments next week through the hearings and deliberations. This significance and engagement policy is a legislative requirement. It had not been updated for around 6 years, and I consider that the policy did need to be updated, and I recommend that the draft policy is adopted by the council.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Crystal.
It's not really a question, but just on page 17, under the significant assets, you have listed Napier Conference Centre building only. It's actually Napier War Memorial Centre. So that needs to be fixed.
Building only. The title needs to be fixed?
Yeah,
So
because, yes.
The name.
Yep.
War Memorial, Napier War Memorial Centre.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, through the mayor. So regarding submission number 13, just firstly, would you be able to give us an idea of what they're sent back in response to their submission?
Yep. So the submitters all know that we are discussing this at this council meeting today, and they were provided the opportunity to speak, so they will have seen this paper.
Okay. And so the staff comment there is our only formal
Yes.
aside from this conversation.
And also following when the decision is made and we have it minuted, I will send that to all of the submitters.
Okay. I suppose just have a bit of a concern that our comment there is slightly disproportionate to the level of effort that the submitters put in, and possibly doesn't address all of the questions that submitter number 13 has asked, sort of specifically, she's asked in her question on page 8, she's mentioned that there was going to be potentially a need to change the strategic assets for iwi settlement opportunities. Are any of our strategic assets actually in line for that?
As I understand it, local government doesn't get involved in iwi settlement opportunities, so that's not something that I'm aware of for any of our strategic assets.
Yeah, my understanding was none of them were.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. And supplementary to that, May. Her question for number 10, is there a reason we chose not to include her wording? And I suppose just for the public, it was, in the table, it suggests that the low risk is a low change to our strategic assets, and she's saying a significant change to our strategic assets should be considered in the high. Is there a reason we chose not to put that in the table?
Yeah, we did look into this, and we decided that if there was a, just trying to read, a high change. So if there was a major change to a strategic asset, it would be picked up by other parts of the table, but that can be included if the council would like it to be included in that box in Schedule 3.
Okay, it seems to add clarity to me.
So the submitter was suggesting under high, for strategic asset on Schedule 3, in the high column, we could add involving a major change to a strategic asset. Currently it says involve changes to ownership or control of strategic assets.
Just open up for discussion. Does anyone else have any view on that wording? Or happy with the wording as it's currently contained? So no further discussion required on that?
Just
Okay.
a question, can I ask about one of the assets that's listed? The civic building, does that also include the library tower?
Or is that the library?
Or is that the library tower, seeing we don't have the building there anymore?
Actually,
The civic building is the building that exists on that site.
So the library tower.
Okay.
But that's not what it's traditionally been called. Because originally the civic building was the one with the council chambers, that building has been demolished. The tower block is called the library tower block.
And that's what, in our long-term plan.
So the civic building is that's what we're calling, so you're effectively saying that we've renamed it.
Oh, okay.
Are you comfortable with that naming of that building?
It's just a bit different from what we've got in our short-term
What you've known it is?
plan, the library
Previously.
tower, that was.
Happy with that word? Are you happy with the wording?
Well, now it's been defined, probably.
been
every
defined?
year.
No appetite around the table to change that to the library tower?
Unless we put in brackets, library tower, so there's a connection.
Not the library
people
tower.
understand.
Can we answer it next week?
call the address of the building.
Could do.
Yeah.
That's not likely to change.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
The address of the building.
The address of
I
the building?
propose it's currently just an empty building. So we could change
We
that
could put the
to-
address in brackets.
Former,
We'll just
put next to the
rename
former
it as
library
the
tower.
address. Yep, happy to do that.
And through you, Madam Chair, yeah, through you, Madam Chair, apart from those other obvious standouts, the question I had when I read the schedule, where are our land asset holdings? You know, the likes of the remaining Park Islands, the other land investments that we have, are they leasehold lands, for example? Are they not strategic assets or
No, they're
significant
not
assets?
strategic assets.
Councillor Price.
I just want to go back to the civic building. Can that stay in there as well? Because if you give me an address, I wouldn't know where you're talking.
I think we do have it as civic building
Yeah.
and the address in brackets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
happy to do that.
Councillor Brown.
Just to round out my thinking on those questions, I suppose, for discussion. I'd be quite keen to see the submitter get a little bit more of a fuller response to her questions. And I think the change that she's proposed to add involves major changes to a strategic asset. I think it adds clarity to the table, and I'd like to see that included in a change.
Yeah, the rule.
Was that the part I asked earlier and other councillors were happy with the current wording?
I couldn't quite read what the room, I didn't,
Yeah, I think we're
Yeah.
going back.
so, okay, so no one agrees that it should be included? I got confused.
I think
Okay.
the nods that I got around the room were that, yeah, elected members were happy with the wording as it currently stood. And I think absolutely I agree, Councillor Brown, and I also think it's probably a given the officer's response that is included in this is not what would be sent to the submitter.
Okay.
That will be a far more comprehensive response. This is more for our purposes during the meeting.
Okay.
And then there will be something, like I said, far more comprehensive sent to submitters.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any further questions or discussion? Very good. Now I have just had Carolyn feverishly adding a couple of additions to the resolution, so we will pop that up for everybody to have a look at. So A remains unchanged. B is listing the amendments that we've discussed. So an inclusion of the Citizens Assembly and the tools available, correct the name to Napier War Memorial Centre in the Strategic Assets list and the Civic Building in the Strategic Assets list to include the address. New point C, direct council officers to include guidelines for engagement tools in the development of the engagement policy. I did just wonder, do we want to include where appropriate or something within that, or I'm happy with some teasing out of wording of that one?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, is the intention of C to cover off the request for a code of practice around citizens' assembly?
The intention is that in the, yes,
Yeah.
but not just for the Citizens Assembly option, but
Yeah.
that recognising council officers have already planned to develop an engagement policy and that is the appropriate vehicle to include some guidelines or code of practice for those engagement tools that perhaps need that higher level of detail around how they would be implemented and processed.
Okay, with that clarity, I'm quite happy possibly with the addition that come back to council for adoption, because I
The
think,
engagement policy, I
Yeah.
think that would be a given.
Yes.
yeah,
I think that would have to come to us anyway.
yeah, perfect.
Yep.
Yeah.
And through the chair, there's probably hundreds of engagement tools, so we wouldn't probably.
So I think if we include where appropriate,
Yes.
or words to that effect,
Yes, thank
Yep.
you.
maybe just in brackets after the engage, oh, yeah, however you want to wordsmith it. I think, actually, maybe just after the for engagement tools, then put in where appropriate.
Policy on how it's used.
Yeah.
It just says it goes in as an option.
One of the tools available.
Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, the wording could be to include guidance for the engagement of the tools listed in the policy. Because in the schedule, it limits the number of, it limits the number of tools. So it reduces the scope. And then it's just a case of from there, officers will just need to identify the ones that need further explanation.
I think the current wording covers that. And recognising as well that this current Schedule 4 is not all-inclusive. That's just essentially naming some of the tools that are available. Yeah. And then the final point D remains the same as the current point B, adopt the significance and engagement policy. Maybe just put in there subject to the amendments as per B. The final part, D. You must have lost the D. A was receive. Oh. Okay.
Receive and adopt.
And we will just need to change what's now D to adopt the significant engagement policy subject to the amendments contained in B. And the point A that's being added in that may not have been in your version of the paper was to receive the written and verbal submission on the significance and engagement policy.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just had a question on the Citizens Assembly. Where it says include in the tools available, do we need to, because the tools are categorised into those inform, collaborate, etc. Do we need to
Specify?
Yes, specify, and I would add to the conversation, I thought possibly collaborate was the best place to put that, with the definition of working together to develop options.
So collaborate and formal.
Yeah.
So in
I.
B1, make that Citizens Assembly and the tools available under the collaborate and formal subsection. Yeah.
And while I have your ear, thank you, Madam Chair, the only other thing I have rocking around is we have no time frame, obviously, on the development of the additional guidance. And is there an appetite to either put a time frame or just note, and potentially we could just note in the minutes that we wouldn't use the tool until, obviously, it was confirmed how it would be used through the development of that policy?
Considering we don't currently have a code of practice or guidelines for any of the other tools we use, I don't know that we normally need to formally note that. And I think it would just be that if it was recommended to us to use that tool, that we at that time would have the confidence that it has been developed to an extent that we'll be able to use it effectively.
Yeah, I just don't want us to get, through you, Madam Chair, to get into a position where it's requested that we use it, but we haven't yet had the adoption of the code of practice. So happy for that just to be minuted, that perhaps our expectation is it's a tool that's not used until we have received all the information on how it will be used. But yeah, just tabling that thought.
Yeah. And with regards to the development of the engagement policy, Anne, you indicated that you had that in your work program to commence halfway through this year?
Yes, the second half of this year. Well, the first half of the next financial year, so the second half of this calendar year, yes.
Okay. And so you would anticipate that that would be developed and ready for adoption
Prior to
within
Christmas.
that 6 month
Yeah, prior to
timeframe?
Christmas, yeah.
Okay. We just, yeah, and again in the minutes make a note that yeah, perfect.
Just, may I speak?
Councillor Bogue.
Just speaking as the apostrophe police, I'm wondering if the apostrophe in citizens should not be, rather than one citizens assembly, if it should not be all citizens in terms of S apostrophe rather than apostrophe S.
No problem, we will correct that. Any further questions, comments, discussion? No. Okay. That being the case, I'm happy to move from the chair if I could have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Crown. And thank you, everybody, for what ended up being quite a robust discussion. Who would have thought, with our significance and engagement policy, or any policy for that matter? They sometimes tend to be the things that we work through with relative speed and ease. But I think we've had some very worthwhile discussions today, and obviously the way that we engage with our community is incredibly important. We all know how challenging it is at times to get our community to come on a journey with us and to provide us with their thoughts and feedback. As much as we would dearly love to hear from them, we do sometimes struggle to do that. So I think knowing that there are a variety of tools and ensuring that we have got those available for our use with robust guidelines around them is imperative, and particularly if it results in better decision making on behalf of our community. So thank you to John for coming along today to present your submission, and thank you to everyone around the table for your contributions. Councillor Crown, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just quickly, agree with everything that you've said, and I was reflecting on when I first came onto council in 2019, what an utter shock it was to get a better understanding of the best practice guidelines around consultation and engagement. The fact that the words actually mean something different in these settings than they mean to our community with their understanding. So I want to thank the staff for what I think has been a simplification of explaining what those different methods and stages, phases of engagement, etc. mean. And I'm quite excited to see us welcome a new tool as well, because the more that our community understands what I think are quite tight parameters around engagement and consultation for us, the more that they understand those, I think that will eventually mean that we are more often on the same page as each other, which is certainly what we all want to see. So I'm happy to support the motion now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Thank you. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Mayor Wise. Just to speak in support of the motion before us, I wanted to touch on why I'm supportive of including the Citizens' Assembly and support the comments yourself and Councillor Crown have made as well. But to me, there was one thing that stood out in the submission around why this would be a good tool, and it was the one line that was said, this group of our citizens would spend the time to learn about the issue. That's what made me really comfortable with including this, because it is my observation that when you talk to people face to face, when they spend the time to understand all the complexities of the issues, that they pay us to sit around this table and learn about and ask questions and inquire, that they have a different understanding and than say you get to on social media with a yes/no question. They get to a deeper level of understanding and give us quality feedback. So that's why I'm really supportive of this, because it is another tool for people to spend the time to learn about an issue and give us quality feedback. So very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We've had 3 in favour. Is there anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Very good. I will therefore put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anne. Moving on to agenda item 2, the Napier Hastings Joint Alcohol Strategy Review, Joint Advisory Group Establishment. And I invite Rebecca up to present the paper. Welcome, Rebecca.
Ngā mare. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this paper. Ko Beck Peterson tōku ingoa, he Senior Policy Advisor mō Te Konihira o Ahuriri. I think most of you know me. I'm Beck, Senior Policy Advisor in the community team. The purpose of this paper is to seek Council's approval to appoint 2 elected members to a joint alcohol strategy review advisory group across Napier and Hastings Councils in order to proceed with the review of the joint alcohol strategy. As part of presenting the paper, I'm happy to provide some context and background of the joint alcohol strategy, which I'll refer to as the JAS. Napier and Hastings councils first adopted the JAS in 2011 and again in 2017. It was developed in response to notably higher rates of hazardous drinking in Hawke's Bay, where 1 in 4 adults were considered to be a hazardous drinker. It has also acknowledged the extent of alcohol harms, including increased crime, injuries, hospital visits, alcohol-related cancers, family harm, FASD and road deaths. It also acknowledged the wide-ranging economic benefits of reduced alcohol harm, including increased productivity, lower unemployment and cost savings across health, justice and welfare sectors. The 3 high-level objectives of the current strategy are to demonstrate leadership to reduce alcohol-related harm, to foster safe and responsible events and environments, and to change attitudes towards and to reduce tolerance for alcohol harm. The strategy supports a combination of regulatory approaches preventative and educational interventions, acknowledging that all of these contribute to reducing alcohol-related harm. This includes the Napier and Hastings Joint Local Alcohol Policy, or LAP, which contributes to the objectives of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012. The Joint LAP, I'm going to take a slight shift here, the Joint Local Alcohol Policy controls local liquor licensing rules, including location of licensed premises, hours of operating, and any discretionary conditions such as timed one-way door restrictions, limiting the number and size of drinks after specified times, etc. The LAP is enacted by Council in consultation with police, medical officers of health and licensing inspectors, as well as the community, about the sale and supply of alcohol in our community. It's my understanding that our joint LAP is to be reviewed in 2025. Now, switching back to the joint alcohol strategy and its implementation. The existing implementation plan identified 35 projects with lead agencies including health, police, council and the JAS governance group. 22 of these were completed, 7 partially and 6 were not completed. Examples of some of the projects implemented under the JAS include the development and promotion of the alcohol-free events brand at events across Napier and Hastings. Napier City Council developed a cross-council JAS assessment matrix for events applying for special licences. These were internal or external, council-led, council-sponsored and funded, or held at council venues other than those with existing licences, such as McLean Park. The outcome of this assessment has included creating alcohol-free areas, signage, reduced operating hours for the special licence and the size of licensed areas, as well as improved cross-council collaboration and awareness of alcohol harms. And one of the biggest ones was no alcohol advertising on bus backs and bus shelters in the Napier and Hastings area. Membership on the planned Joint Alcohol Review Advisory Group will include from each council 4 elected members, 2 youth councillors, 2 council officers and Māori representatives. The purpose of this group is to provide advice to officers on the revised joint alcohol strategy, hear and consider feedback arising from the engagement with stakeholders in the wider community, and provide advice and recommendations to each council on the draft JAS. The terms of reference attached to the paper will be developed with the group. We've had agreement from our governance team to provide administration for the advisory group. And at the first meeting, members will appoint a chair and deputy chair, 1 from each council. The group will then be disestablished once the revised strategy or approach is adopted by both councils. Through the chair, we're looking for council to approve the following 2 Napier City Council elected member representatives for the advisory group, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Gregg. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Bex. Any questions? Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I might have missed something, but do we have a copy of the actual strategy that's going to be reviewed?
Oh, apologies, that wasn't attached.
No. Well, as it wasn't attached, what sorts of things will the group be looking at?
Reviewing the evidence and data, so through the chair, the latest data and evidence, looking at the current implementation plan and what outcomes were achieved, looking at across other councils, alcohol harm reduction strategies, a range of things. So there'll be currently a discussion paper being prepared, which will cover all of those things.
Okay, just further to that.
So just before you move on, we'll just note an action to have that strategy emailed out
Apologies,
to elected members.
apologies.
That's okay. Thanks, Bex.
What would be their interface with the local alcohol policy group?
Through the chair, we see this strategy as sitting very separate from the regulatory approach. But at the same time, what one of the outcomes with the JAS matrix is that we've been working really closely with our regulatory team, so they're aware of it. But it sits as a separate process, so it will be a separate piece of work.
Any further questions? So the recommendation before us is to approve Councillor Taylor and Councillor Gregg as our representatives on the joint group, and also to note the draft terms of reference which are included in the paper. Do I have a mover and seconder, or any general discussion actually before we move into? No, mover, Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Bogue. Would you like to speak to that?
Oh, having been on this group prior, it's a good group and has a lot of input into the strategies in Hawke's Bay as to the use of alcohol.
Councillor Bogue.
Very happy with those two representatives.
Any further speakers to the motion? So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Bex.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Talia to present to us the Mayoral Relief Fund distributions update. Welcome, Talia.
Thank you. So last time I was in front of council, we had just received a notification that another donation was coming into the fund. Before that, we were expecting to actually close the fund. So $50,000 has been donated by Flo and Frankie Limited. They've got a lovely boutique on Emerson Street, which opened just after the cyclone. Seeing the devastation, they felt it was very appropriate to donate to our fund. We have just made one further distribution since that donation has come in. So there is still around just under 45,000 in the fund to be distributed. Thank you.
Thanks, Talia. Any questions? Councillor Bogue.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just a reminder, Talia, on how do people or groups or organisations apply for this funding?
So the distributions are approved by the Mayor and the Chief Executive. Most communication, I believe, has gone straight to the Mayor. We do also have some people around the organisation still dealing with those affected by the cyclone, and so we do have a few others who act as liaisons, I guess, as well.
Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through Madam Mayor, just a question. When are we looking to wind up the fund? Do we have a date in mind?
I don't. It would just be when the funds are all used, unless the Mayor sees fit to close it otherwise.
Yeah, and obviously we are keen to see the money utilised in the best way possible. There has been talk of a memorial being placed somewhere within the community, so that may be one of the options as to where we could distribute the balance of the funds. But obviously also, very keen to hear from any of our impacted community members as well who may be in need of assistance from the fund. Any further questions or discussion? Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Gregg, Councillor McGrath, would you like to speak to that?
Only to say that the ongoing transparency, I think, would be very welcome from the community.
Thank you. Any other speakers? So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. As mentioned earlier, agenda item 4, CCTV policy updates, has been withdrawn. Thank you so much, Talia. So we will move on to item 5, the amendment to the 2024 meeting schedule, which Anna is here to talk to. Probably not a lot to say.
No, we'll take the report as read.
Take it the report as read. So yeah, we are 2 new dates for the Ahuriri Regional Park Joint Committee, and also great to see a date for the Freedom Camping Bylaw Review hearings. We'll all be looking forward to that. So you're happy to move, Councillor Price? Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Crystal. Did you wish to speak to that?
I think you've shown the excitement of this coming, and
Yes.
I'll just reiterate that. Thanks.
We can't wait. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And then staying with Anna, we've got the action points register is at the 6th of May. So just opening up for any questions that anyone may have with regards to the action points register.
The item that
Councillor Brown.
Reference number 61, the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Group. It says it's there. So we requested that the CEDM staff come and present to us the most affected risks and stuff to Napier. It says that we're going to have a report come to council. I was imagining that was going to be more like a workshop, but is that more looking to be a formal paper now?
Thunus has just stepped out of the room.
Oh,
Have the answer.
sorry. Unfortunate timing. I didn't spot that.
That is unfortunate
I
timing.
think the report that is coming is the HB CEDM report. That is their risk register, which I think we wouldn't workshop their risk register. We would then take that to hold our own workshop for our risk register, which we may then feed up back through to them. But
we will let you know
Yeah,
what
we'll
the
get
plan
some
is in
clarity.
terms of reporting that back to you and what we're planning to do with it.
I suppose the point is really keen to have that conversation about what the major risks are and quantify them.
He's so busy making this
Terrible timing. I just walked out.
While we're getting a response from Thunus, any other questions?
Yeah.
just item 114 has been resolved to my satisfaction.
Yes, I've noted that. Yes, we understand that one's been closed. 114.
114.
Hawke's Bay Museums.
Wonder if we could get an update on 113, the SOI for the airport.
Yes, so that one has been, we have provided a response on the SOI and the letter of expectation, and I'll actually be providing you with an update at the Prosperous Napier meeting on the 6th of June. So I'll be providing a report to that meeting with the feedback that I've provided the airport, so we can have a discussion about that.
Thank you.
Venus.
Madam Chair, you're going too fast on the agenda. Yes, the idea is that we will come back to council to cover the risks and talk about them, but we will also then come back to council with the actions that's come from the CDM group review that was done. So we will do all of that in one report.
Could you just let us know what kind of format that's coming to us in? Is it coming in a formal report, or is it coming to council in a workshop?
We will come back I think the best will be a workshop, so that councillors can have the opportunity to have a look on what are we doing, what we are doing now, and then also what are the new actions coming in and how are they impacting our report.
And any idea?
Or our action, sorry.
Any idea around the timing of that?
Well, it will be around the 27th of June, as we said. However, we need to wait for CDM to do their action plan so that we know what do we need to include in our plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions on the actions register? No. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Crystal, did you wish to speak to that?
Oh, it's just good to see that the records are up to date.
Yep. If there's no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Now we have the reports from the Ahuriri Regional Park Joint Committee held on the 1st of May. Deputy Mayor, did you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a procedural question with regards to these reports that we receive from standing committees. Are we receiving the recommendations, so noting them, or are we resolving to accept at council the recommendations? And perhaps that's a question for governance, what the actual wording is.
Thanks, Anna.
Through the chair, sorry, was that in regards to Ngā Mā Nuka Nuka's
It's actually just a procedural question in regards to any resolutions of standing committees that come to us in this format. What is the wording of the resolution council is passing when they are we receiving those minutes and therefore just receiving the recommendations, or are we resolving to accept them?
So it depends which committee we're talking about. So obviously our standing committees have decision-making powers, but if they referred something to council, or if Ngā Mā Nuka Nuka o Te Iwi, their minutes, they are recommendations which council then considers and confirms if they're happy with them. Does that make sense?
So, through you, Madam Chair, is it all right if I just delve into that?
Yeah.
Because I'd like to get it straight in my mind. So both the papers that we have in this format today are both recommending committees. Neither of them make decisions. So today, for both of these, are we receiving their recommendations for a decision at, say, a later stage? Or when are we accepting and therefore resolving to accept and complete their recommendations?
I suppose it depends on the topic. I'll just grab the agenda and have a look and be able to.
Thank you.
May I suggest something through you, Madam Chair? So if we're talking about the Ahuriri Regional Park paper, just in that context, you're right, they're not a decision-making committee, but they can make decisions, I guess, on the project and the progress of the project. If the Ahuriri Regional Park Committee need to make a decision, they would have to refer that to council, and then the officers would bring a paper to council for decision. In this case, I understand this to be just receiving the reports that were provided to that committee. The committee has then made no sort of further suggestion to take a decision to council on these matters.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Anna and Rachel, for your indulgence on this. So just to clarify, for all of the recommendations within papers that we're receiving over the next two items, they are both all recommendations to council, and if we were to resolve to action any of them, a separate paper would come to council. Yes.
It's a bit like the old, yes, but also if you think of it in terms of when we had double debate, it's a similar situation in terms of some things being, it might have come through Ngā Mā Nuka Nuka o Te Iwi first and then to council to consider. So in those situations, there might not be another paper written. It would be presented to you for you to then confirm that you were happy with their recommendation.
I think this is what needs teasing out.
Yeah, so if I'm hearing what you're saying, Deputy Mayor, if we use the Ahuriri Regional Park Joint Committee recommendations as an example, I would see that that is coming to us to accept the recommendations that have been made by that committee. Would that be your, rather than just receiving them, because they're not a formal decision-making committee, we have to either endorse or accept the recommendations?
I think my understanding was we were just receiving, not endorsing and resolving ourselves at council. We were receiving them because none of those resolutions require a decision of council.
So it could be different for any committee at any point in time. It could be a receive or it could be an accept, depending on what the contents of the...
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I was particularly interested in where the wording of what we're resolving.
Because it's not in there.
Because it's not in here.
clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't actually have an officer's recommendation individually for...
That's right.
Yes. So,
And
So
you
I could
could
just-
amend that wording if you felt it wasn't appropriate as it was.
What are we amending? Because we don't have a resolution of council in the paper, in the agenda.
all we have is the report.
So I think there needs to be an overall, like, for these sorts of papers, we need to receive them.
Yeah.
And when you think about a joint committee or any other committee, they need to understand their terms of reference and their decision-making parameters. And if they feel that they need a decision of councils or a decision of the committee that they can't make, then they would put a paper, and a paper would come to council. So my suggestion is that we just somehow add to this that the council is receiving these reports.
Yeah, I think what's happened is we normally have a cover paper with these sitting underneath it, and it's that cover paper that includes that we are receiving these and that's what we vote on.
Yeah.
And I think that's just missing in this particular agenda.
Agreed.
I think what's not clear here is that it's kind of mixed up and included in the purpose of the report as a kind of resolution of council, but it actually isn't clear that it's a resolution of council. So we usually have what the purpose of the report is, and then whether there's a resolution of council sits underneath that, and we used to have a resolutions sort of section in the paper, which might be more useful to go back to that format.
Yeah, but we
if you would like.
Yes. So through you, Your Worship, I think if we could leave that as a takeaway for governance, that we could
Yes,
have
we can work on
some
that, a
certainty
bit more
on what
clarity for you.
council was passing. And for this paper, I'd be more than happy to move that we receive the minutes of the joint
Ahuriri
committee.
Regional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need a new...
Just, Madam Mayor, may I make a comment about one of the other recommendations from those papers?
Can we just get the Ahuriri sorted, and then we'll move on to Ngā Manokanaka. So we just need to please have a council resolution that we receive the recommendations from the Ahuriri Regional Park Joint Committee. I could have a mover and say thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, and a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Crown. Any further speakers?
I would just give you a very brief update that we are making good progress on the joint committee there. You'll see in the papers that we have endorsed our engagement approach for moving into the development of the master plan for the Ahuriri Regional Park. This week, Heniwai and I and the project team have met with the Department of Conservation and the Hawke's Bay Airport as the two key stakeholders identified in that engagement plan, and we have a list of other key stakeholders that are having touch points with the committee and the engagement plan over the next 3 months as we develop the master plan, and I'm looking forward to bringing all their feedback back to you at this table as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Did I put that? I didn't, did I? I'll just put that on the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And now we'll move on to the reports from Ngā Manokanaka Te Iwi Committee held on the 10th of May. Any questions or discussion on this one? Councillor Bogan.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. One of the committee resolutions from the last Ngā Manokanaka o Te Iwi meetings was to recommend to council that the funding shortfall for the Waka Hub be budgeted for or confirmed in the 3-year plan. So this is a straight out recommendation to council. So what happens to that?
So we receive that recommendation, and consideration of that recommendation will be part of our three-year plan deliberations.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
I'd be happy to move the same.
Receive the recommendations of the Ngā Manakonaka Oti Iwi Committee.
Happy to
Thank you very
second.
much.
Happy to second.
You're happy to second, Councillor Crown. Excellent. Did you wish to speak to that?
Thank you. And as you were engaged in another meeting, Your Worship, I had the pleasure of chairing that meeting. It was a really good meeting and there was a lot of discussion. The only thing I would highlight to Council, other than obviously what you have in your papers, is you'll see the committee did resolve to have a workshop on their particular areas of focus over the next 12 months. So I'm looking forward to where the committee gets to with that and seeing sort of dedicated papers come through Ngā Manakonaka that are of interest to the committee members. So thank you.
Thank you for that update. Councillor Crown.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, slightly adjacent topic, but back to making sure that we have some certainty around what we are doing when we receive these reports. Yeah, I'm really happy with the whole receive, as long as the joint committee or committee operating within their terms of reference. To me, it makes sense that the order is that we receive. If there is something for us to consider in our decision making, it comes through as a recommendation, and that's the next step. So clearing that up, I think, is great. It's kind of the way I've always been operating. So to think that it was any different is a little alarming, which is why I'm having some clarification. I think is so important. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crown. Any further speakers? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And I would just like to take a moment, thank you, Anna, to acknowledge we have unfortunately had two recent resignations from Ngā Manakonaka Oti Iwi, being Joe Tariha and Tipini Cottrell. So I want to thank them for their contributions over the term, and we look forward to liaising with the two marae that they represent to appoint our new representatives on that committee. So moving on to reports under delegated authority. And we have our tenders let, of which there are two contracts under, I think it should be $1 million, not 100,000. Being the 24 Clyde Road slip remediation and the Inner Harbour maintenance dredge. Not sure that if we have people, oh yes, we do have people that could talk to those. If there was any questions from anybody. There being none, could I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor McGrath and Councillor Price. Would you like to speak to those?
No, it's all good.
No? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, and carried. So we will now move into public excluded. If I could please have a mover and seconder to do that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan and Councillor Tariha. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We'll just have a very brief 2-minute break.